This year has brought massive steps forward in robotic vacuuming and mopping technology. And today on The Hookup, we're going to rigorously test the flagship cleaners from iRobot Roomba, Ecovacs, and Roborock to figure out which one is the best of the best. It's been 20 years since iRobot released the original Roomba, and after that there were about 15 years of incremental but pretty small improvements. Then, in 2018, iRobot changed the game again when they released the first self-empty bin, giving you at least a month of maintenance-free cleaning and adding another must-have feature to the list. Since about 2018, robotic vacuum makers have been aggressively innovating in an arms race to see who can build the perfect robotic vacuum and mop. And the biggest players in that game are Roborock, Ecovacs, and of course, iRobot. We're going to be looking at the flagship models from each of those brands, and I'm happy to say that they aren't just copies of one another, and each one has taken a unique approach, especially when it comes to mopping. Starting out with the Roomba. For whatever reason, iRobot has never put LiDAR sensors on their robots, and up until this year, they've relied entirely on upward-facing cameras using a mapping technology called VSLAM that basically takes thousands of pictures of your house and then uses landmarks to determine the layout and the robot's position. When compared to LiDAR mapping, VSLAM using an upward-facing camera is slow, complicated, and offers basically no upside. Thankfully, this year they decided to switch things up a bit, and their newest Roomba, the J7, uses a front-facing camera instead. The J7 still relies on VSLAM to create maps, which is still slower and less accurate than LiDAR, but at least now they can use that front-facing camera to do AI obstacle recognition to avoid things like shoes, cords, and of course pet waste. iRobot has also resisted adding mopping features to their robotic vacuums, and instead they use a separate line of mops called the Braava series. And in this video, I bought the highest end version of that, which is the Braava M6. The Braava and Roomba are able to communicate information about maps through what iRobot calls their imprint technology. So in addition to vacuuming and mopping performance, we're also going to test how well that works. Moving on to Roborock, I'll be testing the brand new Roborock S7 MaxV Ultra. And that's a lot of modifiers in the name, but they do all mean something. S7 is the model number, which designates things like brush design, suction power, and battery capacity, while MaxV is Roborock's AI computer vision that uses a front-facing camera to detect and avoid objects like shoes, cords, and again, pet waste. Last, the Ultra in the name refers to the base that it comes with. If it said Plus instead, then it would designate Roborock's auto-empty vacuum base, but the Ultra version also includes their mop washing and refilling station in addition to an auto-empty bin system. Although it does have a front-facing camera, the Roborock S7 MaxV Ultra still uses LiDAR as its primary mapping system, which as I mentioned is both very fast and incredibly accurate. In addition to computer vision object avoidance, the S7 also has front-facing laser object avoidance that Roborock calls their 3D structured light scanning. And then for mopping, the S7 uses Roborock's Viborize technology that vibrates the middle portion of the mop for an efficient scrubbing action. And then unique to Roborock is the ability to raise that mop approximately a half an inch off the ground to avoid dragging it on carpeted areas, as long as you have low to medium pile carpet. Last, moving on to the very aptly named Ecovacs X1 OMNI. This is the most futuristic, feature-rich robotic vacuum ever made. The X1 vacuum itself has LiDAR mapping, laser object avoidance, and a front-facing camera for AI object detection, while the OMNI base includes a mop washing and filling station, hot air drying, a very well-designed auto-empty bin system, and it's even got a built-in voice assistant called Yico that can respond to dozens of cleaning and maintenance commands. But before we get into testing, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, HolidayCoro.com. If you've ever thought about putting on a light show for Halloween, Christmas, or any other holiday, Holiday Coro has everything you need to get started with the hobby, including individual controllers and components, as well as ready-to-run kits. One thing that I can tell you for sure is that waiting until October to buy your supplies for your Christmas light show is not a good plan. And right now is the time to buy to ensure the best price, availability, and customer support. Check out Holiday Coro using the link down in the description to support this channel. For the first test, I want to get the basic stuff out of the way. A robotic vacuum should be good at vacuuming. I made a mixture of 10 grams of rice, 10 grams of flax, and 10 grams of baking flour, and I sprinkled that onto my vinyl flooring, and I weighed the robot's dustbin before and after the cleaning run. On this hard flooring test, the Roborock cleaned up all 30 grams for a score of 100%, while the Roomba and the Ecovacs picked up 24 grams for a score of 80%. However, something that I did find interesting with this test was that each of the vacuums left behind a different type of debris. With the Roborock, there were traces of flour left over, but no flax or rice, while the Roomba seemed to clean up almost all the flour and rice, but left almost all the flax. Then the Ecovacs cleaned up everything but the rice. And this was pretty surprising to me, since the suction power on the Ecovacs X1 is relatively high compared to the Roomba J7. But I think it actually has more to do with brush design than it does with suction. You can see that the X1 has Ecovacs standard bristle and rubber roller, which I think when combined with the smooth floors caused it to push away the rice grains before it could actually suck them up. In contrast, the S7 has a single rubber roller and is able to make better contact with the floor for picking up the rice grains. The Roomba, on the other hand, has their patented double roller, which is known for making great contact with all types of flooring, and I honestly expected it to do really well in this test. But it is possible that the lower suction power on the J7 just wasn't enough to pick up the heavier flax, and while the rollers could grip the rice for pickup, it's possible that the flax was just too thin and too close to the ground. To test carpet performance, I used the same 30-gram mixture with my brand new 1-week-old high pile carpet.
This is such a bad idea.
This time the Roborock picked up 23 grams or 77%, while the Ecovacs picked up 20 grams for 67%, and the J7 did surprisingly poorly here, only picking up 16 grams for a score of 53%. I say surprisingly poorly because this high pile thick carpet is supposed to be where the patented dual roller system shines, and is one of the reasons why iRobot has been able to stay competitive despite lacking things like LiDAR mapping and combination mopping robots. However, it is entirely possible that this carpet is just too high pile and too dense for these rollers, which typically perform a lot better. And actually that wasn't the only issue caused by my obnoxiously high pile carpet. First, this is the only carpet that I've ever seen that Roborock's Viberize mopping system can't accommodate. The carpet is just too soft and too thick, and it caused the wheels to sink down enough so that the mop made full contact with the carpet. This not only meant that the mop got the carpet really wet, but it also caused the Roborock S7 to get stuck several times during normal cleaning, because the mop was just dragging on the carpet, creating a significant amount of friction, which caused the wheels to slip. I was able to solve that issue pretty easily by just manually removing the mop, but to me that defeats the main selling point of the Viberize system. I did do a little further testing using some carpet samples and a thermal camera, and I was able to determine that the Viberize system is effective for carpets that have under a ½ inch of pile, but no matter what style of carpet you have, there will be some slight dampness on the transitions between the hard flooring and the carpet, just due to the angle of approach of the robotic mop. However, in contrast to the S7 with Viberize, the iRobot Braava and Ecovacs X1 won't even attempt to cross carpeted areas. So in my opinion, the Viberize system is still superior if you have a mixture of both carpet and hardwood flooring. The second issue that popped up with my new high pile carpet was that the bristles on the Ecovacs brush created a significant amount of carpet fuzz. So much so that the entire bin was filled after just a short run. I'm also slightly concerned that this could cause my carpet to look prematurely worn out, since I do run my robotic vacuum 5 days a week upstairs. The Roomba J7 also produced a decent amount of carpet fuzz, but only about half as much as the Ecovacs X1, and out of the 3 vacuums, the Roborock S7 produced by far the least amount of carpet fuzz, probably due to its single rubber roller design. I also used this carpet fuzz test to evaluate the design of the auto empty bins, since I'd specifically run into an issue with Ecovacs' previous auto empty design, which used 2 smaller ports and often struggled with things like carpet fuzz and pet hair. In this test, none of the vacuums had any issues with large amounts of fuzz clogging the bin, and all of them were able to completely empty their bins autonomously. I also did a quick check to measure the quality of the filtration system on these auto empty bins by filling each robot's dustbin with 30 grams of fine dust from an old vacuum bag, and I measured the air quality around the base during emptying. In this test, the Ecovacs X1 OMNI base and Roborock Ultra base actually decreased the number of fine particles in the surrounding air during the emptying process, while the Roomba J7 caused a slight increase in small particles, indicating a less efficient air filtration system, but still not enough to cause alarm. Next, let's talk about mopping performance. For this test, I placed 1 teaspoon of coffee and 1 teaspoon of grape jelly on my vinyl flooring and let it dry for exactly 30 minutes. After that, I sent out the mops to do an area clean in roughly a 10 by 10 area, and here are the results. The X1 OMNI completed this mopping run in 11 minutes with really good results. The dual spinning mopping pads were able to easily clean up the coffee spill and left very little residue from the jelly. I was also really impressed that the area around the jelly wasn't sticky or wet, which definitely can't be said for the other mops. After a quick cleanup, I sent out the Roborock S7 with the Viberize mop, and in the 10 foot by 10 foot area, the Roborock took significantly longer, completing its mopping run in 18 minutes compared to the Ecovacs 11 minutes. And while it was able to easily clean up the coffee spill, there was unfortunately still a very noticeable jelly stain, and even more unfortunately, the stickiness of the jelly got spread around to the entire area.
It's so sticky.
So before starting the next run, I had to do a thorough manual mopping of the area, and then I sent out iRobot's mop, the Braava M6. The M6 cleans by spraying cleaning solution out the front of the robot and then driving over the stains with a microfiber mopping pad. The Braava M6 was the slowest of all three, needing 19 minutes to mop that same 10 foot by 10 foot area, and although it was able to mop the coffee spill, the jelly was way too much for it, and as you can see, just like the Roborock, everywhere the Braava M6 went after running over the jelly turned into a sticky, wet mess. I also noticed that the Braava M6 seemed to leave the floor the wettest, so I measured the water usage for each of the robots, starting with the easiest calculation. The Braava Mop's water tank weighed 551 grams before mopping and 434 grams after, meaning 117 milliliters of water ended up on the floor in the 10 foot by 10 foot area. The Roborock S7 and the Ecovacs X1 were slightly more difficult to calculate because they used their clean water to wash the mopping pads and also refill the robot's internal water tank. But after subtracting out the water in the dirty water tank, I calculated that on the Roborock S7 it left 132 milliliters of water on the floor and the Ecovacs X1 left 140 milliliters. However, just a visual inspection after mopping makes me question these results, since there was almost no visible water after the Ecovacs X1 mopping run and very little after the S7. My guess is that these discrepancies are based off of water that was used to wash the mops but didn't get sucked into the dirty water tank and water that was left in the mopping pad after washing. On the Ecovacs OMNI base, the mopping pads are washed by rotating them against these suction stations and spraying them with clean water. While the Roborock Ultra base has a spinning brush that not only sprays water, but also moves back and forth over the mopping pad to remove any dirt. The Ecovacs OMNI and the Roborock Ultra clean the pads before and after the mopping run for 2 total cleanings. And the Roborock Ultra had 158 milliliters of dirty water in the tank, which means roughly 79 milliliters per cleaning, while the Ecovacs OMNI base had significantly more water with 442 milliliters in the dirty water tank, meaning it uses around 220 milliliters of water per wash. After normalizing the volume in the dirty water tanks and giving them a thorough mixing, I measured the total dissolved solids using a TDS meter and found that the dirty water in the Roborock Ultra base had a TDS of 277 parts per million versus 269 parts per million in the X1 OMNI dirty water tank. This indicates that the Roborock Ultra base may be slightly more efficient at cleaning the mopping pads, but after physical inspection, I can say that neither the X1 OMNI nor the Roborock S7 had any residual stickiness from the jelly, while the microfiber pad on the Braava M6 was noticeably sticky to the touch. One of the most interesting things that happened during the mopping run was when the Roborock S7 MaxV stopped and looked right at the jelly stain before deciding to clean it up. I'm guessing that the purple color of the jelly indicated that it wasn't pet waste and was therefore okay to clean. As I mentioned, the S7 MaxV, the Ecovacs X1, and the Roomba J7 all have camera-based AI object detection, designed to help it avoid all objects, but most specifically pet waste. To test out these object avoidance systems, I used 2 different models of pet waste and an untied running shoe. And in this test, the Ecovacs X1 did a great job identifying and avoiding the pet waste, but was almost too close for my comfort, and I think I'd prefer if it kept a little more distance. The same goes for the shoe, which it did give a slight nudge, and it could have just been pure luck that it didn't suck the laces into the brush. The Roborock S7 MaxV, on the other hand, didn't have that same luck, and even though it identified and tried to avoid the shoe, it still ran over the laces and sucked them up into the main brush. I'm not sure if what happened next was programmed in or just luck, but it looks like the vacuum used the furniture in combination with aggressive rotation to actually pull the laces out of the vacuum, which was a pretty impressive move. After that incident, it didn't have any issues avoiding the pet waste, but it also got a little too close for my comfort. However, unlike the Ecovacs X1, there's actually a setting in the Roborock app to specify that you are in a home with pets, which will increase the sensitivity for finding pet waste and will also cause the vacuum to keep a safer distance from any potential problem zones. Last to complete this test was the Roomba J7, which has iRobot's POOP, or Pet Owner's Official Promise, which basically means that they'll replace your J7 vacuum if it ever runs over pet waste. When the Poop Promise was first announced, there were some rumors that iRobot was going to reimburse you for professionally cleaning your floors also, but the actual agreement is a lot more underwhelming and only covers replacement of the robot itself and only for 1 year after purchase. Still, you can tell that the Roomba J7 was by far the most cautious of the 3 robots when it came to pet waste, and it avoided a whole 2-foot radius around each of the doggy landmines. But what about the Braava mop? My initial understanding of the iRobot imprint technology was that the Roomba J7 would be able to transmit information about potential problems to the Braava M6 whenever they were scheduled to do a mop after cleaning run. However, after testing this out, I can confirm that that is not the case, and the Braava mop has absolutely no ability to avoid objects on the floor and will spray and smear any and all dog poop on your hardwood flooring. Aside from the Braava, I was actually really impressed by the AI computer vision performance on all three robots. And in general, I thought all three vacuums did better than average in every single category. But I don't think that there is a one-size-fits-all winner between these three flagship vacuums. So here are my overall recommendations, but be sure to stick around afterwards to hear some additional nitpicks and final thoughts. First, if you have a combination of hard flooring and medium to low pile carpet, the Roborock S7 MaxV Ultra is the best mopping and vacuuming combination robot ever made. You can create highly customized cleaning schedules that will keep your house vacuumed and mopped with very little maintenance on your part. Basically, once a month, just empty the dirty water tank and fill the clean water tank and check the brush for tangles. The Vibra mopping system is the only one on the market that can travel over carpeted areas to go from one hard surface room to the other without dragging a mop on your carpet, meaning it can perform both tasks without any input on your part, which can't be said for the Ecovacs. However, if you have only hardwood floors, the Ecovacs X1 OMNI is the best choice since it had significantly better mopping performance than the other two robots. Its major downfall is that if you do have carpet, you'll need to manually remove the spinning mopping pads from the X1 to put it into carpet cleaning mode. For me, that defeats the purpose of all the automation in the base because I'd still have to remember to switch between mopping and vacuuming mode multiple times a week. In the future, I hope to see some arms on the X1 OMNI base that can reach out and detach the mopping pads automatically. I've also got two other small nitpicks and design notes on the OMNI base while I'm at it. First, comparing the water tanks on the X1 OMNI to the Roborock Ultra, the Roborock put the handles on the side of the tanks, while Ecovacs put them on the top. The problem is that these water tanks are pretty heavy and the entire weight of the tank is being supported by this one small plastic tab. If that tab were to wear out or break, then you could potentially spill 3.5 liters of dirty water onto your floor. Second, the X1 OMNI is an upgrade over the Narwhal T10 in almost every way, except that the Narwhal base has a convenient removable insert in the mop washing area, and that's important because that area tends to get really gross, and being able to pull the entire section out to wash it in the sink is much more convenient and effective than trying to reach your hand into the OMNI base. So while the OMNI base is great and the most advanced system we've ever seen on a robotic vacuum, I'll definitely be looking forward to the improved OMNI V2 base whenever that happens. Moving on, we need to talk about the Roomba. If you don't care about mopping and have primarily carpet, then the Roomba J7 is definitely the cheapest and best way to get computer vision object avoidance, high performance vacuuming, and an auto empty base. Unfortunately, the accompanying mopping solution, the Braava M6, is mostly terrible, and you probably shouldn't buy it. J7 good, M6 bad. So those are my general conclusions, but this review isn't quite over. For regular viewers of my channel, you probably know that I'm not a fan of having cameras inside my house, especially ones that are connected to random cloud services. So let's talk a little bit about privacy. First, I want to make clear that cameras on robotic vacuums aren't new, and Roomba has been using them exclusively for over 7 years. I personally don't love the idea of an always-on cloud-connected camera and microphone in my house, but my privacy concerns tend to be higher than normal people, and you'll obviously need to make those decisions for yourself. But I do want you to have all the information to make that decision. Starting with the Ecovacs X1 OMNI, not only does the OMNI have a front-facing camera, but it also has a built-in voice assistant. And that means that putting the X1 OMNI in your house gets you an always-on cloud-connected microphone and a mobile camera. Unfortunately, just like most voice assistants, the only command that's actually processed locally is the wake word, and the rest of the voice recordings are sent to the cloud for processing. That said, I found Yeeko to be incredibly convenient and super innovative, with features like spot-based cleanup where you can just tell Yeeko to clean where you are, and it uses the camera to find you and spot clean in that area. Ecovacs also leaned into the camera issue by allowing you to use your X1 OMNI to keep an eye on your house using their video manager function. It does have some pretty cool features like waypoints, home patrol, and two-way talk, but even though it requires a separate pin to join, and it gives an audible warning when somebody's watching the camera via the app,
Hey, Ecovacs X1 OMNI, are you recording in my house?
it's still a cloud-based camera, and I am just personally not very comfortable with that. Unfortunately, all the Ecovacs X1 OMNI functionality is tied to the cloud, and after blocking it from the internet using my firewall, the X1 OMNI showed as offline in the app, even when I was connected to the same local network. Yeeko also became non-functional, and the only way to start cleaning was to press the button on the dock. I also suspect that Ecovacs may be using some cloud processing for their AI computer vision because it didn't do nearly as well avoiding objects without an internet connection. Like most Ecovacs robots, the X1 can be integrated into Home Assistant, which gives you a lot of great functionality, but the integration uses the Ecovacs cloud, so there is unfortunately no local control option. The Roborock S7 MaxV did slightly better in my local control testing, though it still shows up as offline in the app when you block it from the internet. The Home Assistant integration is impressive and allows for full control, map access, and even area and spot cleaning as long as the S7 MaxV has access to the cloud. But once you block that access to the cloud, things get a little bit weird. It was possible to issue basic cleaning commands and return to base commands, but the vacuum bounced between connected and unavailable, and the map download function stopped working entirely. I will say that the computer vision on the S7 MaxV seems to be just as functional when blocked from the internet, which indicates that the image processing is done on the robot, which is a good thing. As far as manual control of the robot and accessing the video feed, Roborock does allow it via the Roborock app, but it does require manual activation by pressing all 3 buttons on the robot until you hear a voice prompt. The Roborock S7 MaxV also has two-way talk, which was incredibly clear for a Wi-Fi based camera.
Hey, you there. Why are you filming inside my house?
And the video feed didn't look half bad either. Needless to say, none of this functionality can be handled locally, and if you block your S7 MaxV from the cloud, the only way to control it is by issuing those simple commands in Home Assistant. As far as I could tell, the Roomba J7 didn't have the option to live stream the camera feed, but I have heard that that feature might be rolling out soon. However, I'm happy to report that the J7 integrated into Home Assistant perfectly and is 100% functional using local control only. After blocking the J7 from the internet, it shows as offline in the iRobot app, but in Home Assistant, the control is still instantaneous, and like the S7 MaxV, the camera avoidance system seems to work perfectly even when blocked from the internet. Thank you so much to all of my patrons over at Patreon for your continued support of my channel, and if you're interested in supporting my channel, please check out the links down in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button and consider subscribing, and as always, thanks for watching The Hookup.